And pro tip, anytime I got a podcast to do, I chew up a couple of those before the podcast. So everything's firing up there. That's part of my brain boosting stack. I do that, dihexa, sometimes a low dose nicotine and Nupept. And man, with that, it's you've got something that's
Locked
improving
in.
your processing speed. Yep, you've got something that's repairing those neurons. You've got a librarian that can go back and retrieve those memories, and you've got you're boosting dopamine and acetylcholine for focus. So really checks all the boxes.
Welcome to Iron Summit, the podcast where we dive deep into the art and science of becoming your best self, blending expert insights on strength training, smart recovery, optimal nutrition, and mindset mastery to help you elevate your game. All right, we're back at it. Today we have, is this our first repeat guest, Ryan?
Other than Pat, yeah.
Yeah, second repeat guest. And Pat he's a good friend of ours, but that speaks volumes to how much we really appreciate and trust what Anthony has to say. For those of you who didn't listen to the first episode, Anthony is considered one of the leading researchers in the world of peptides and just overall supplementation and performance enhancement through nutritional supplements, peptides, anything you can think of, and is really one of the most knowledgeable individuals in this part of the industry. Today, I'm excited because we're going to go over 10 under the radar WADA-Approved performance enhancers. So these are ways, if you are competing in a tested sport, you can improve your performance through different substances, nutrition, supplements, etc. And I'm excited to hop into it today, Anthony. This is something that's always really interested me. So happy to turn it over to you.
Absolutely, guys. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me back on your podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation the first time, and really got some awesome stuff to go over. So I'm super excited to start to unpack some of these. What's cool about the things we're going to be covering, a lot of them are things people haven't even heard of. So they're not really on the WADA radar yet. And some of them are nutrition supplements, some of them are small molecules, but they're all things, at least at this moment, you're going to be able to use if you're in a tested sport. And they're really going to give you noticeable boosts in performance for different reasons, but we'll kind of unpack that one by one. So I guess a good thing or a good.
Can I ask a question before we hop into it, Anthony?
Sure.
For us, what is a small molecule, and how's that different than a peptide or a steroid?
So when we think about a steroid, that's going to be like a hormone, and it's basically going to be something that's synthesized from cholesterol. A peptide is going to be essentially two or more amino acids that are bound together by a peptide bond. So we're talking about proteins. And then when we talk about small molecules, it's kind of literally a small molecule that can be kind of a combination. It doesn't necessarily have to be a protein, doesn't necessarily have to be a lipid. It's just kind of none of the above.
One more question for you there. So when we're talking about, like, I know you put the caveat on there, approved right now, would you say, like, in this industry, like a lot of this stuff, you know, once there's a measurable effect, like, and the science kind of catches up to it, it starts to get banned? Or is this like, can you put caveats as we go through these on, like, this one probably will continue to, obviously it's all speculative, and in your opinion, like, continue to be something you could continue to use versus, I know it's always kind of like a cat and mouse game between regulators and like new protocols.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And to answer that, I think a lot of the things that we're going to be covering here are things that really should be able to continue to be allowed, like especially the nutrition supplement ones. There's a couple of the small molecules that they might end up testing for in the future, but as of right now, they wouldn't have the technology to be able to test for those. So we're probably at least a year or two away from where these would be picked up. And the couple of them were actually used in the Olympics this last year. So you guys are getting some really cutting edge stuff here. Should be a lot of fun to go
Well,
over.
Also, I believe if you test, like, because I know some, like, they're getting better and better with testing. So some of these, I know it's happened in wrestling where these Russian athletes test positive, like 10 years later, 15 years later, but they're testing positive for substances that were banned at that point in time. You can't test positive for something that was banned like retroactively after you competed.
So you get grandfathered in, you get to cheat legally.
Yes.
Okay,
That's correct.
That's a good distinction there, Max.
Yep.
Good way around it.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Well, let's hop into it. I'm really interested for this episode.
Sure. Yeah. So probably a really good starting point is when we think about whether you're in an endurance sport or a strength sport or any type of activity where performance is going to be in demand. The whole process begins with the mitochondria, and that mitochondria needs energy. And when we think about what that energy looks like, basically, it's the donation of an electron. And that's why NAD became so popular. You hear about people getting like NAD IVs, and that's just a horrible idea, but we can unpack that a little bit more later. Um, there's also a misconception that, as we get older, we don't produce as much NAD. But in fact, what happens is there's this enzyme that breaks down NAD. It's called NNMT. Um, Sounds like we're talking about alphabet soup right now, but I won't quiz anybody on that. So NNMT degrades NAD and uses it all up. That and the other thing that happens is like if we have cancer cells or we have senescent cells, and we all have these, and our immune cells and our muscle cells, these all have what's called a CD38 receptor. And easy way to think about that is it's just like this super powered magnet. And what it does is on the cancer cells, the senescent cells, it's like this magnet's turned up like 100 times more than our muscle cells and our immune cells. So when we do an NADIV, what happens is it's like, boom, it goes right over to all the cells we don't want it to feed. And kind of a funny side note is if you guys or somebody you know has got an NADIV, everybody, most people are like, wow, I get this NADIV and I had like this big like flush. And then I felt really great the next day. And then I was like super tired. Well, exactly what you did was all your zombie cells that were taking a nap, you just woke those guys up, said, hey, let's do a little bit of work. They sucked up all your NAD and then they went back to sleep. So definitely not a good thing. So the first thing I'm going to introduce is a way that we can optimize our NAD. It's going to work by helping to decrease that NNMT activity. Additionally, it works on, it's called the NLRP3 inflammasome. And that's what's in macrophages, and it modulates like whether they're going to be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. So what that means is, after we work out, we want that signal of inflammation, but then we want to be able to turn that off so we can start the repair process. So this is going to help facilitate that. Um, it the so drum roll, here we go. It's the first one we're talking about. It's called 1-MNA, and if we were to classify it, it's identified as a myokine, and that's a small signaling molecule that's going to be produced by our muscle cells. So when we work out, this is actually something that we make. So that's one of the reasons that like probably not going to be popping up on the banned list anytime soon. Um, it helps with vasodilation. Um, it helps prevent blood clots. So all the people that got that certain vaccine that we're not supposed to talk about, and that increased risk of clotting, like this is really something you should look into. But for athletes, anything that's going to improve nitric oxide, it's going to improve endothelial function, and it's going to optimize our NAD. So we're getting that donation of electrons at a controlled speed so the muscle cells can get them and our immune cells can get them instead of the bad cells. So this 1-MNA, that's the first one on my list.
Awesome.
Natural supplement, you can order it online.
Is that taken orally usually or through injection?
Yeah, so it's just a capsule. When they did the human studies, most random number ever, they came up with 58 milligrams for what the dose of the capsules are. Um, Now, speaking from experience and with the athletes that I work with, we find four capsules. So essentially, four times that dose, 232 milligrams to be optimal. And you want to take it in the morning because you have a natural circadian rhythm where your NAD should be high in the morning, and then um, kind of when you sleep, it regenerates. So this would be a morning supplement, and it would improve energy production, DNA repair, ability to metabolize carbohydrates and fat, nitric oxide, reduce inflammation. Um, Probably
Yeah.
be easier to just say what it doesn't do.
What about if, like, let's say you took 4 capsules, what if you bump that up to 8? Like, what are the potential, like,
Well,
downstream
yeah, let's
effects of
double the dose.
well, I'm just saying that, like, there's gotta be
Yeah,
a
I
point
know what
where
you mean.
it's not helpful. What are, like, the, cons of taking too much of this?
No, that's a really good question. So if we understand what it is, you'll understand a little bit more why, like, I don't know that necessarily there'd be like an immediate downside, like side effect, but it just wouldn't be effective.
Okay.
The 1-MNA is something that's essentially produced naturally when we're metabolizing NAD plus. So if we put too much of that in there, like we can only use so much at a time, and because of the feedback loop involved, it wouldn't necessarily raise those levels an appreciable amount. So biggest side effect would probably be atrophy of the pocketbook. It it could get to be pretty expensive, but yeah, I don't think they're, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't read about any side effects for going higher on the dose.
Cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is like, I'm looking right now. You can just buy this online. It's just a supplement essentially, huh?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's readily available and great thing for people. I mean, whether you're a stay-at-home mom that needs a little more energy to keep up with the kids, or whether you're an Olympic level athlete, this is something that can benefit you.
Awesome. All right, number 1 in the books. I'm
All
excited.
right.
That's you started off with a bang. Let's see here we go.
Well, that's a perfect segue because the second one is a BAM. We
Oh,
started with
bam.
a bang, and now we're going to a BAM. Um, so the second one is gosh, I'm going to get emotional here. I've been researching this one since 2018. I'm a huge fan of this. It's an amazing compound. It's called BAM15, and it'd be fun if we give kind of a little bit of context around it. So maybe you guys and some of your listeners might be familiar with DNP. It was used in bodybuilding for fat loss, and in 1930s, it was actually a regular prescription drug they gave people for fat loss. Around, I think it was the early 50s, it got pulled from the shelf because people were literally cooking themselves from the inside out with this compound. And um, with the DNP, what happens is it's not really tissue specific, and it works on all four uncoupling proteins. So it kind of covers a lot of bases, and it can take up to 36 hours for those metabolites to clear. So really kind of was one of those things where people were taking it, they were getting great weight loss, but they start to accumulate these metabolites in different tissues, and as those build up, this uncoupling effect um, kind of explodes tenfold. And uncoupling, just so that people understand what it is, um, basically like when we've got the electron transport chain in complex 5, and what it's doing is it's making ATP, like for oxidative phosphorylation. That's how we make so many ATP. And
At Iron Summit, we are about getting everything we can out of our workouts and everyday lives. If you aren't wearing a pair of barefoot or wide toe box trainers, you are leaving gains on the table. The Sashi Athletics Ronin Ichi Minimalist Trainer is a perfect barefoot shoe. Not only does it perform like other major brands on the market, it is actually good looking. Even my wife says so. Get a pair today for 10% off with the code IronSummit10. Link is in the bio.
An uncoupler basically allows, it's like a controlled leak, almost like a tiny little safety valve, that's allowing the electrons to kind of slip out. And in doing so, your body becomes less efficient at making ATP. So it works harder and harder and harder to meet that ATP demand. And in doing so, like with DNP, there's a lot of heat dissipation. And that's kind of why people were cooking themselves from the inside out. But BAM, what's so unique about it is one, it's tissue specific. So you don't have to worry about it depositing in all these multiple tissues, and affects 3 of the 4 uncoupling proteins. So you have uncoupling proteins like in your brain and your heart and all different tissues. And some of them, like in our heart, for instance, it's the most metabolically demanding tissue. We want to make sure that maybe that one's not affected. It'd be a bad
Stay
thing.
alive.
That's definitely important for performance. But with BAM, it's got a 1-hour half-life. There's no observed toxicity, and they've tested in mice amounts that I don't know anybody could afford. And of one data, like with as little as 50 milligrams, seen substantial fat loss in people that had stalled out on GLPs. There's a study published where they compared VAM15 to GLP-1, and I believe it was 23% more weight loss with the BAM. And that was without changing calories or anything. So it's just essentially, and there's no stimulatory effect. So you don't have to worry about, like, if you take caffeine, late or whatever, disrupting your sleep. And what's really crazy about it is, even though it's making us less efficient at making energy, you don't feel lethargic with it. And there's not the heat dissipation. So it's really a unique uncoupler.
So this is
Uh,
excellent for fat loss.
Really good for fat loss, but for performance, where the big benefit is when we think about our mitochondria. The more mitochondria we have, the more energy we can make, and more energy we make, essentially, the better we function. So when our mitochondria are working this hard to make energy, the analogy I use, it's kind of like my fiance is visiting her mom right now in California. And if I were to find out she's coming back home in an hour, me and my bulldog, we got to get this place clean, or heads are going to roll. So he's a lot of help, but, between the two of us, we're not getting it done. So as hard as I'm working, I'm going to call 10 of my buddies and I'm going to be like, guys, code red, Julie's coming home. Let's get this place cleaned up. So our mitochondria is kind of the same way. When they can't meet the energy demands, they make more mitochondria. And when they do that, we can have mitochondria that are dividing slow, and that's what we want. When they're dividing slow, what happens is they sweep all the garbage to one side, and all the good stuff, the parts that aren't broken down, are in the other side. And that garbage ends up, it's called mitophagy, it ends up getting destroyed. And then the part with like 3/4 of a good mitochondria finds another part with 3/4 of a good mitochondria. Now you have a bigger, better mitochondria with spare parts, and that process continues. So the other thing BAM does is creates mitochondrial biogenesis and controls that rate of biogenesis, which is really important. So think of it as more mitochondria and quality control.
So what with this, like, would you stop taking it so that then your mitochondria is more efficient again? Like once you build up all this extra mitochondria, you like cycle off this, and then now you have like theoretically better mitochondria and more, and then you create more efficiency by stop taking this peptide.
Man, that is brilliant. I swear, it's like I sent you guys the questions to ask me, because I couldn't have queued it up better myself. That brings us to the next compound I'm going to talk about. Um,
Perfect. Let's
and
go.
man, I mean, you guys are, that was the best question. Seriously. So the next one is called SLU-PP332. And you might have heard people talk about like SLOOP. That's usually what people refer to it as, because Otherwise, it's a lot of letters and numbers to remember.
Yeah.
And unless you're a nerd like me, you're probably not going to remember all those. So when we talk about SLU, we'll just call it SLU. It's a small molecule, and it functions as it's called an estrogen-related receptor alpha agonist. And when we hear estrogen-related receptor, our minds probably go right to hormones, like, why would we want estrogen?
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting about it is it's called this because the receptor structurally looks a lot like an estrogen receptor, but it has zero estrogen properties, none at all. Um, what it does is we have these ERRA receptors, and they're in the nuclear genome. And nuclear genome is like our genes in our nucleus, and then we have a separate set of genes, 100% of which come from our mother, that are in our mitochondria. And SLU does almost the opposite of BAM. It works through what's called a futile cycle. So give you an example, like in glycolysis, we start with 2 ATP, we finish with 4 ATP. So we have a net gain of 2 ATP. If we took SLU, and these are just hypothetical numbers, um, it would be like we started with 10 ATP. We made more ATP, but we used more ATP. So we end up with 12 ATP. So there's still only 2 ATP at the end that we gained, but um, we've created a lot more work for the mitochondria. So just like me having to clean the house again, we got to make more mitochondria. And what SLU does is it's a exercise mimetic. So exactly like what you were talking about, this would be the one that you would do on a workout day, and it would amplify the effects of exercise. Um, and you would end up like rapidly creating more mitochondria um, to meet those energy demands that are coming from exercise, plus the futile cycle from SLU. So it's really, really important. I want to make sure that people are clear on that. There's a product coming out that's got BAM and SLU in there, and best way to describe that would be like, I love pizza and I love ice cream, but I wouldn't roll it into a big ball and eat it at the same time. I mean,
Some people
and
might.
yeah, it's possible, yeah. But when we think about kind of mechanism of action and how they're working, and what could go wrong, like the only way you could possibly mess these up, it would be taking them at the same time. And the reason is because remember, BAM was engineered to not have heat production. But if you're ramping up these processes, it would be possible theoretically that you could generate heat with BAM. So then you're losing the advantage of taking it. Also, BAM works by creating a deficit in ATP, and SLU works by increasing the amount of ATP. So it's like you're wiping out each one. So really, really specific recommendation is SLU on the workout days. You would do as little as 100 micrograms in the morning, 100 micrograms early afternoon, and then BAM on a non-workout day when you're recovering, when you want to have that slower mitochondrial division and quality control. Make sure you got all good mitochondria. Um, and that's how you do it safe. That's how you end up with a lot of mitochondria, and that's how you really see some boost in performance.
With SLU, if you did just SLU, could you gain fat tissue?
Um, no,
Because
the
I'm just thinking it's doing the opposite of, like, it's basically your body's not working as hard to create that ATP. So would it slow down your metabolism? That was my train of thought. I don't know if it's accurate.
no, it's I like your thinking on that, and I see what you're saying, but what ends up happening is there's because of that futile cycle, um, it actually increases calorie burning. We just don't have a net gain.
Yeah, I got it. So, because I've heard with SLU, and that makes sense because I've heard with SLU, people take it like That's why it's called an exercise mimetic. It's like you worked out, but you didn't work out.
So
Yeah,
what?
definitely still want to work out with any of these compounds to get the most
Yeah.
out of them.
So what about what's like? How long does it take for this to clear your system? Because if they're doing opposite things, and I'm like, let's say I worked out at 9 p.m. and then I'm like taking a rest day the next day, and I take it in the morning at 7 a.m. What's like a half life on this, or how could I potentially accidentally be overlapping the two?
Yeah, the good news is on BAM, the half-life is only an hour.
Okay.
It's been measured between an hour to 2.5 hours. And on SLU, I'd have to look it up again. I believe off the top of my head, it's 6 hours. Um, so they're both pretty short half-lives and going to be able to stay out of trouble on that. In fact, although I don't think it would be optimal, you could even do something like SLU in the morning and BAM before you go to bed. But I think it makes more sense in my mind. And what I've seen the best results doing is SLU on the workout day and then BAM on the non-workout day.
Off day. Yep.
So is there any like cautionary would you ever be worried about like if we're like multiplying a lot of cells, like any like cancer growth stuff with this, and like how do you monitor that stuff? And um yeah, I guess aside from like if you just see it, you don't start feeling good and you got a tumor in your arm, like how do you think about that?
No, that's a really good question. Actually, what's really cool about BAM is when people are have cancer, our metabolism switches to more glucose dependent. Like we spend a lot more time in glycolysis, and one of the reasons that cancer thrives is because we're not able to use oxidative phosphorylation, where we can make more ATP, or it turns the dial down on that so low that it it kind of hides from our immune system. So one of the other really cool things about BAM is it forces us back to oxidative phosphorylation. So if if somebody did have cancer as part of a cancer therapy, theoretically this would be something they could use to start having that metabolic flexibility that gives more ATP to the immune system, so that our natural immune surveillance could be turned up, identify the cancer cells, and it also helps combat the oxidative stress. And um, yeah, there'd probably be more anti-cancer benefits with that.
Oh,
And with the SLU, the only place you'd run into trouble, like if you see it with biohackers a lot, that it's optimize, 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 or bodybuilders even, like mTOR, mTOR, mTOR. And it's really, really, really important. I can't stress this enough, that the two things that are going to govern health are going to be redox balance. And that's really simply like the balance of NAD plus to NADH, and the balance between like mTOR and AMPK. And when we think about mTOR, I mean, shoot, I was a buck 17 when I graduated high school. So to me, like mTOR was the holy grail. And I'm like, why would I ever not want to be an mTOR? And mTOR is just, we're building, building, building protein synthesis, but we don't take time to sweep up the garbage. So there's no getting rid of senescent cells, and it causes inflammation. And there gets to be this point where our body can't keep up with the energy demands. So it just goes into panic mode, glycolysis, where it's just burning through glucose. And the only ATP we're making, like 4 ATP. So we're burning through a lot of glucose, but we're still energy deficient. Our immune system doesn't have the energy to run. It creates inflammation. Big problems. The easiest way to explain it, so I think everybody will understand it a little better, when we think about growth hormone versus like a GHRH, GHRP, um, growth hormone, we make over 105 different isoforms of growth hormone in our body. And the growth hormone we would get like at a pharmacy, it's perfect for injury repair or acute situations because it's a really mTOR dominant isoform of growth hormone. And that's one of the reasons that if people take growth hormone for a long time, you hear about people becoming insulin resistant because they lose that metabolic flexibility in the cell because there's not that balance between AMPK and mTOR. Now, when we take a GHRH or GHRP, naturally we pulse growth hormone 5 times a day. So it mimics that pulse. And when it pulses it out, that's mTOR. And then when it comes back down, that's AMPK,
That makes
which is
sense.
basically where we're cleaning out all the garbage and recreating metabolic flexibility, improving insulin sensitivity, all that good stuff. So hopefully that kind of explains it.
That does. And so the SLU is more on the mTOR side of things, mTOR energy pathway.
SLU would be better, or I guess the way I think about it is just SLU is faster mitochondrial division and BAM is slower mitochondrial division.
So is BAM more AMPK and SLU is more mTOR?
They're both closer to AMPK
Okay.
because AMPK is going to be activated anytime our body senses like stress or a deficit. So like exercise, if when we start to run out of calories or whatever, that would be like something that would drive AMPK. But at the same time, we stimulate protein synthesis. So it gets a little cloudy. It's never like we're all AMPK or all mTOR, but um, yeah, they both of these compounds would probably be closer to like an AMPK than an mTOR.
Got it. What is oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry, not to harp on this too long. What about like adding creatine with this, right? Because creatine's like indirectly affecting ATP.
Yeah, creatine would be a great addition for really anything. It wouldn't make the mitochondrial uncoupler not work. Um, and we use creatine for so many things, like it's a methyl donor. So for people that have trouble with methylation, one of the best things you can do is like creatine or trimethylglycine. It's important for our brain. Um, yeah, it does help with ATP. So yeah, absolutely, would not be a bad idea to take creatine.
Yeah, we could spend the whole time on these two. This is super interesting, but I want to get to number 4.
Sure. Yeah. So next one is called synapsin RG3. And it's a compounded blend of ginsenoside RG3, which is basically like a bioactive extract from Panax ginseng. And then it's also got nicotinamide riboside, which is like a vitamin B3 analog that increases NAD production. And it is compounded with vitamin B12 as a nasal spray. And what's so cool about this is this nasal spray, it helps with neurogenesis, synaptogenesis, neurological health in general. So when we think about any of our strength sports, basically like when we're training and we're seeing improvements in rate coding and force output, those are all neurological adaptations. So this is something that's going to have a tremendous effect on that. Additionally, it'll clear out brain fog, improves focus, memory.
That's a nasal spray.
It's a nasal spray,
Cool.
or there's actually it's called Synapsin LPT, and that's the form that I prefer. They're chewable liposomal tablets. You can get them at Metabolic Elite.
What's that one called again? Synapsin
Synapsin LPT.
LPT. Yep.
You already knew about this, Max?
What?
You already knew about this?
Well, from Anthony. I've taken the Synapsin LPT. That one's cool because it really is it's basically like I'm going to way oversimplify this, but like a much more effective B vitamin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to think about it is it's like a ginseng and a B vitamin that has a tremendous effect on nervous system as well as cellular NAD support.
Yeah, and I've always like ginseng is like that caffeine that's like you don't really get jittery from. It's like that more it's like a neurological caffeine stimulus. So no, I think this is a great one.
Yeah, I love it. And pro tip, anytime I got a podcast to do, I chew up a couple of those before the podcast. So everything's firing up there. That's part of my brain boosting stack. I do that. Dihexa, sometimes a low dose nicotine, and Nupept. And man, with that, it's you've got something that's
Locked
improving
in.
your processing speed. Yep, you've got something that's repairing those neurons. You've got a librarian that can go back and retrieve those memories, and um, you've got you're boosting dopamine and acetylcholine for focus. So really checks all the boxes.
Is the dopamine and acetylcholine from the nicotine?
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
whole. We could do a whole nother podcast on that. I wanted to check this.
Oh yeah.
That is interesting. I've heard that low dose nicotine is actually can be very good for your health, especially your neurological health. My question for you would be, how do you not let low dose nicotine become high dose nicotine? Because that's really easy to do.
I tell people
experience.
it can be tough. I tell people only use it for like don't use it after 2 p.m. and only use it for like focused bouts of study. And as long as you stay under 7 milligrams, it shouldn't be addictive. It also reduces inflammation in the colonocytes. So they're doing some research for Crohn's disease, and it parks on the angiotensin 2 receptors. So it can potentially compete for real estate with like COVID virus. So yeah, just a ton of benefits with it.
I've heard it's like a great, for a lot of people who are experiencing like the long COVID symptoms, nicotine is a great way to clear some of that out.
Yeah,
It kind of bumps it off the receptors.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it for COVID long hauler consultations, and then I also use it for people with ADD as part of a protocol for that, and had tremendous success.
What about, but it's so addictive, right? Like I've never met somebody that starts like taking, and usually it's not for like health benefits, right? But I've never met somebody that like takes nicotine a couple times and is like, I'm done with it. They just like keep doing it.
I think as long as the dose is low, there's you're not and the other thing too is like when we look at different delivery systems for nicotine, so like with a cigarette and all the health problems you hear about, those aren't so much the nicotine, although people end up smoking a lot, so that does raise the heart rate, put more stress on there, but a lot of it's going to be like the tar and glyphosate that comes with it. If they just stick to like a low dose nicotine gum, or I do a patch when I travel for my immune system, um, I think they'd be all right. And there's even a professor, I think he's at Stanford. He's in his, I believe it's his 80s, and he still does low dose nicotine every day for when he's reading.
Well, and also like I think to Ryan's point, like if you can get the Zyn 3 milligrams, right? Mm-hmm. What's the half-life of nicotine? It's like a couple hours.
Yeah, I know it's short, but off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a couple. But the problem, people end up doing it like every 3 hours, and then even if you're doing 3 milligrams, you start to have like a building effect, and that's where I think people start to get really addicted. You probably, and this is speaking from personal experience, and when I've gotten loose with it and kind of done it whenever I want, and it does make you feel good. There's definitely a dopamine rush.
Yeah.
You can definitely end up doing it more than you should. But if I like set strict rules around it, like Anthony said, like only when I'm reading and not after 2 p.m., then you can kind of stick to that. At least that's what I've found in personal experience. But I will, even when you're doing that, like I've definitely started to drift towards a little too much and got to get myself in check.
You could always just have wife, fiance, girlfriend, just take them and lock them in a drawer or something. Just give you one a day. But I guess there'd be potential that it's one of those things where you love that focus, you love that just how sharp you feel, and hard to be like, one more is not going to hurt me.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. When I'm working, it's hard not to, because most people work 8 hours a day. It's hard not to want to just like have nicotine for 8 hours while you're working, so you are locked in. But that's where I think people go real wrong with it.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So that, I'm guessing nicotine wasn't on the list, but
No, it wasn't, but maybe it should have been. Next one I was going to talk about, it's called ATX 304, and it's what's called a PAN AMPK activator, a pan AMPK activator. And what that means is it directly stimulates that AMP protein kinase. And AMPK, that's like what we were talking about. So it's a small molecule, and it's going to be available in compounding pharmacies. I think actually by the time this podcast airs, it should be available through a compounding pharmacy. And it's designed to pharmacologically trigger the energy sensor that would mimic like fasting at a cellular level. And
Iron Summit is brought to you by Bridge Athletic. Looking for a way to streamline your training programs and deliver exceptional results? Check out our friends at Bridge Athletic. Their platform is packed with over 300 templates and 1,500 instructional videos, courtesy of subject matter experts like Exos, FMS, and Hyperice, making program design both efficient and impactful. Our listeners can take advantage of an exclusive offer. For a limited time, get your first 30 days free and your next month at 50% off when you use code Iron Summit, all caps. That's code Iron Summit, no spaces, all caps, for 30 days free plus 50% off your second month at bridgeathletic.com. Check it out and start assigning custom programs directly to your athlete's mobile device.
in preclinical studies, they've used it to treat like metabolic disease, and enhance glucose uptake and fat burning. So kind of the way to think about it is it's you guys probably remember like the kid story, like the pan plays the flute and everybody follows. And it kind of tricks people. So that's how I remember it. It tricks your body into thinking that it's starving, and kind of kicks that AMPK in, and starts to improve things like that fat burning and glucose use. And when we think about like, well, how's this going to apply to athletics? Since AMPK is sort of the master regulator that gets switched on during exercise, and um, if you give this to athletes, you're going to see like big improvements in endurance and stamina. Um, Also, you're going to see a lot of fat loss, and they're going to be able to preserve muscle mass. And the caloric restriction mimetic effects, calorie restriction's been associated with longevity, so you got some benefit there too. So yeah, really kind of a cool compound.
awesome.
Feels like you got to be careful with that as an athlete though too, because there's definitely a body fat percentage that's like protects your joints and ligaments a little bit more, gives you a little more energy when you're doing, especially like high explosive stuff. But that is interesting for like a combat athlete that's trying to lose weight already. If you can preserve your muscle mass and drop, body fat, theoretically should help you with your sport.
Yeah, what I find to be ideal with this compound is using it for like 4 to 8 weeks after like an intensive hypertrophy, where we're more mTOR dominant phase of training, or in endurance athletes. It's terrific because it really helps to create the ability for that cell to be metabolically flexible, so that you're not going to fatigue as fast. You can use ketones, you can use glucose, and you can switch back and forth really efficiently. So any type of endurance sport, or intermittently between intense uh, strength strength training.
Awesome. All right. That was number 5, right? So we got number
Believe
6.
so.
Yep.
Number 6 could arguably been number 1, but it's just not as flashy or whatever. So I figured we'll kind of mix it in there. But honestly, it's the foundation of every protocol that I do. I think it's kind of, without this, like, you're really cheating yourself out of gains. and it's Dr. Seed's Amino drink. Um, you can get it as like pre-made. It's called iCell water. Um, the Amino drink, Dr. Seeds did all the research on hepatocyte hydration and came up with this optimal blend of neutral osmolytes, which are basically just these small molecules that cells use to like regulate the water balance. And the neutral osmolytes that are in there, it's got 5 grams of creatine, 5 grams of alanine, 4 grams of glycine, 3 grams of glutamine, and 3 grams of leucine. And it's flavorless. So I always end up like just squeezing a little bit of lemon in there and putting like electrolytes, minerals, electrolytes in there. I like the trace mins. Um, and essentially, the way that it works is it creates this incredible cell volume. Like anybody who's taken creatine remembers the first time you took it, how you get that cell swelling effect. And not only does that look cool and feel cool, but the most important thing about it is when we have these fully volumized cells, that means they're polarized. And when they're polarized, because remember, whether we're talking about hormones, peptides, any of these things, they work through cell signaling and um, communicating with receptors. So a cell has to be able to send and receive messages effectively. Analogy I use, and this makes it real simple, is like let's say I want to have satellite TV. I'm into watching TV. I want to have 200 channels, so I go buy a satellite, and I'm like, and this is probably like a real life story. I'm the guy that doesn't read the directions. I'm like, you know what? Got the satellite TV, 200 channels. Here we come. So I hang it out my window, facing at the ground, and I go to turn on the TV, and I'm like, 12 channels, man, what a ripoff! Like, I got more than this with an antenna on top of the TV. And then my fiance, who's a lot smarter than me, is like, maybe we should look at the directions. It's got to be on the roof pointing southwest. So now that's like a polarized cell. Now I'm getting 200 channels. And I had to tell her she was right. But um, yeah, when we think about all these cool molecules we're talking about and all these supplements and everything, for those to work, we got to have volume in a cell. And that's really what hydration comes down to. People talk about drinking water and taking electrolytes, and all those things are good. But if we can't get them in the cell and that cell's not polarized, we're just going to look really watery, and we're just going to have a lot of stuff floating around that our cells can't actually use. So this kind of opens up the cell and pushes them in.
So iCell water is the like product name, but you could make this yourself, right? With the ingredients you listed out.
Yeah, absolutely. You could go on Amazon and just order all these from like bulk supplements. And if you don't mind doing a little kitchen chemistry, you just mix it up in the morning.
Will you run through one more time?
Sure, yeah.
Yep.
So you take a half a gallon of water.
Yep.
And you're going to add creatine monohydrate, 5 grams, and L-alanine, 5 grams, glycine, 4 grams, L-glutamine, 3 grams, and low-dose leucine, 3 grams. And once you have that all mixed up, you can put in your like electrolytes or whatever. Um, and what you want to do with this, you don't drink it all at once. You just want to sip that throughout the day. And it's going to keep those cells nice and full and good cell signaling all day. Any peptides, supplements, hormones you're using, even just normal bodily processes, everything's going to work better.
Cellular hydration is key.
Absolutely. And the other cool thing,
go ahead.
It helps with blood plasma volume, and it also suppresses breakdown of protein. So when we think about, we don't want to lose that muscle that we work so hard for, this is a great way to kind of guard against that.
How does that suppress protein breakdown?
Mainly, it's from when we're dehydrated, we're going to produce more cortisol, and cortisol is going to break down tissue. So when we're properly hydrated, um, there's there's mTOR signaling through the what's it called, the ubiquitin protease pathways, which are going to reduce the breakdown of muscle tissue.
Science, Ryan. That's why.
Yeah,
um,
there's a lot of you got a lot in your head. I don't know how you remember all this.
you ask me anything else outside of science, New York Yankees or Bulldogs, and you're just going to hear a lot of ask Julie.
That's good. What's all right? Number 7.
So number 7 is another nutrition supplement. It's one that was popular for a while, and then I think people forgot about it, and I am a huge fan of it. Just arginine alpha-ketoglutarate. And is that one that you guys are familiar with?
I know L-arginine. I don't know. Is it similar?
So it's got some of the benefits. There's calcium alpha-ketoglutarate, and then there's arginine alpha-ketoglutarate. And I like the arginine alpha-ketoglutarate because just like the L-arginine, there's some signaling in the nitric oxide pathways, which is going to help with like vasodilation, um, and improve arginine's. The alpha-ketoglutarate itself improves the stability of arginine, so you can absorb it better.
Got it.
But the real magic is it's intermediate in the citric acid cycle. So when we think about kind of like rate limiting steps for citric acid cycle, when we've got arginine alpha-ketoglutarate in there, it kind of keeps that engine running. So super, super important. It helps remove metabolic waste like lactate. And the other thing that's really cool about it, like it helps with bone regrowth. So if you ever, break a bone, it can accelerate the healing there. It helps, and I'd have to look up the mechanism. I don't know, but it helps with females' hormones as they get older. Um, and yeah, just a real good thing for supporting that citric acid cycle, energy metabolism, and nitric oxide production.
This is awesome.
How would you get that naturally? Like what kind of foods?
Honestly, I don't know what kind of foods that would be in. I buy it like from bulk nutrition, and I do um you can do, depending on like what you're using it for. My personal recommendation, I do 10 grams 30 minutes before a workout and 10 grams after a workout, which is on the high side. You could do as little as 3 grams.
And short,
Um,
that's arginine AKG, right?
yeah, arginine AKG.
Yep. I see that could have, because if you're doing this pre-workout and you're reducing metabolic waste or you're being more efficient with metabolic waste, you can just train harder for longer.
And the rate limiting factor, like in like Krebs cycle, this is kind of filling in that gap. It's helping remove waste products. So yeah, it's really gonna improve your ability to make energy and ability to clear waste, and that's going to translate to better workouts and all those other benefits.
Heck yeah. I'm going to order some of this right after this.
Yes, inexpensive, easy addition that really it's silly not to take it.
Awesome. All right. What's number 8?
Number 8 is now this is another one that could have been my first place one. In fact, if you were to put me on a deserted island, you'd say I can have 3 things. This is going to be one of them. Ketone ester, and specifically it's the ketone ester.
Because this is a controversial topic today. I want to, but I know you're a big fan, and I think I'm a big fan myself. I played around with them, but let's get into it.
Yeah, so I should first of all clarify that I'm only talking about the beta hydroxybutyrate ester, and that's the one that Ketone Aid makes. And um, I'm not paid by them or anything. It's just that's specifically the one you want to use, and it's got to do with how it gets metabolized in the body. But and we can unpack that a little bit. But I think if we kind of go through like all the different benefits first, that it'll be an easy sell. You'll definitely see why I'm so big on these. So the ketone esters, it's a fuel that our body can use without having to really break anything down. So, like in a situation like cancer or post-viral fatigue, where we're in that state of glycolysis we discussed earlier, where we don't have that high yield of ATP, ketone ester can immediately get us back to oxidative phosphorylation and making 36 ATP, so our body can, so we start to get energy again. Um, if you have somebody with a concussion, you can give them ketones, and it's a great way to keep the brain running so that you don't get long-term issues from TBI. Also, if you're going to have surgery, doing ketones before and after surgery protects from anesthesia. Ketones decrease histone deacetylase. And when we think about our genes are all wrapped up like in they're acetylated, and when they get unwrapped, that's when we can make copies of them. So when we decrease the histone deacetylase, the double negatives always mess me up. When we decrease histone deacetylase, essentially we're limiting the replication of inflammatory genes. We've got better control over that. um, it it inhibits some of the inflammasomes that are associated with these histone deacetylase enzymes. The other thing it does after a workout, you can take it; it'll keep insulin levels elevated, so you have better absorption of carbohydrates. So I'll do my ketone
Yeah, that
ester
was
right after the workout.
my question for you. Was going to be because like I've heard people try and rebut ketone esters by saying you don't really need them in the presence of carbohydrates. So yeah, can you break that down a little bit?
So your body can use carbohydrates and it can use ketones. When you have ketones, your body will use those first, so it spares the carbohydrates. And taking them post workout essentially is going to allow you to keep your insulin levels stable and elevated, so you can take more carbs afterwards without having to have like those spikes and dips in blood sugar. So to their point, if you're taking carbohydrates, it's not that you need them, but there's absolutely a benefit to them. And I think you're cheating yourself out of gains if you don't use them.
So it kind of keeps that blood sugar arc just a little more even when you take it post workout.
And
Does it do that anytime you take ketone? Like if you had a big breakfast with a lot of carbs and you took ketone esters right after breakfast, you would kind of smooth out that blood sugar spike and dip.
yeah, so essentially, if you think about it this way, like when we take in a whole bunch of glucose, our cells switching to, burning this glucose. And if it's like, man, there's more glucose than I can handle, that's when some of that is going to get diverted to like fat and places we don't want it to go. So when we give it a ketone, it lets it take a break from metabolizing glucose and lets that cell keep running, so it can kind of get caught up on that backlog of glucose. And then less of it goes to fat. So my strategy with the ketones, I take them first thing in the morning when I wake up on an empty stomach. And I usually wake up around 4 a.m., have my first meal around 7:30. So I've got about 3.5 hours in there where I've just got the ketones in my system. And when this beta hydroxybutyrate ester breaks apart, the butyrate in there is like an all you can eat buffet for the good bacteria. So I'm doing something for my microbiome. I'm giving my brain fuel, and I'm extending that AMPK window where my body thinks like there's not food coming in, and my brain's demanding a lot of energy. So doing things like improving cellular efficiency and supporting autophagy. Um, then I take it 30 minutes before my workout. They're going to peak at about 45 minutes. So during the workout, once I've started using glucose, if I it allows me to kind of tap into that muscle glycogen, switch over to using ketones, and remind my body that we've got fat or carbohydrates for an energy source. And then as those ketones burn off, switch back to using muscle glycogen. So easiest way to explain that, the simplified version, is you can get more high quality sets in, but
Yeah,
still.
you're opening up, like you're unlocking that ketone energy source, which is normally you have to be really hungry and have no carbs around, and your body's having to go through ketogenesis, right? Which is like not the most efficient for athletes. So this is kind of a way for athletes to use ketones as energy without having to go deep into ketogenesis?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a fan of like ketogenic diets or carnivore diet. You're going to create too high of an acid load, and on a ketogenic diet, you accumulate lipopolysaccharides in your brain. But if you're eating well balanced, like Mediterranean type of diet, and you add ketones to it, you've got the best of all worlds. And the other thing they do that's really, really awesome is, remember I said like all of our health, all of our performance, everything, like if we had to distill it down to one thing, it's at redox, which is the balance between NAD plus and NADH. And taking the beta hydroxybutyrate ester optimizes that ratio. So right before I go to sleep, I do a half a capsule, which is like a half a serving. And when I wake up in the morning, I've got optimal redox conditions. So I'm ready to donate those electrons and set myself up for success that day.
Awesome. That's a great one. I have also taken these myself, and I feel noticeably better, especially like a lot of mental clarity, just good energy. And
Increase
also
your,
it
your
helps with
gas tank.
what?
I'm just thinking like endurance wise, increases your gas tank, right? You just
Should,
got more
right?
fuel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For all the cyclists and endurance athletes that I work with, um, these are the foundation of their routine. All the guys in Tour de France, I mean, they just they live off of these things.
Also,
And
it helps with appetite regulation, right? Because you're like getting less of the blood sugar spikes and then crashes.
yeah, and also reduces lactate production. And the other cool thing, taking it on post workout, it upregulates. It's called HIF1A, which is a hypoxic factor we produce that increases production of erythropoietin. So it's got some long term benefits in terms of our ability to carry oxygen in our system.
Cool. All right, that's basically ketones are great. Yeah,
Yes, but very, very specifically the ketone
yeah.
aid, KE4 ester that the other ones, the reason I'm so specific about this, um, when the other ones metabolize, they metabolize, it's like you're dumping them in your system, and they actually, on a lot of people, work as a central nervous system depressant, and you don't have all the benefits for like histone deacetylation and
So you need
HIF1 alpha
the
and
DBHB bound to R13.
uh-huh.
That's the key difference. Because like I was just looking while we were talking. Ketone IQ has R13 butanediol, but it's not DBHB bound.
Yeah, the ketone IQ essentially like that's just dumping it right in your system. And the compared to the ketone aid has one that dumps in your system and one that's more or less the simplified version. It's kind of like a precursor. So you have a steady release of ketones instead of overwhelming your system with this sharp switch that as soon as you burn through those creates a central nervous system depressant effect. Instead of like the kind of, it's like if if you put a little cream in the coffee and you drink it, the caffeine burns off slower versus if you just take the caffeine and then you have that crash. So yeah, the ketone aid's definitely the one that you wanna do.
Did you just make a case for cream and coffee?
I may have.
Black is the only acceptable way to drink your coffee. You have a glass of milk with it if you need that.
Yeah, you gotta have
slow
coffee
burn.
and then milk.
Yeah, not together, separate.
Exactly. Awesome. All right. So let's get what is number 9?
Number 9 is just simple bicarbonate. And it probably sounds a little underwhelming, but the performance enhancement benefits with it are just unbelievable. It basically, when we think about how it works, it's buffering our pH levels. So we're not accumulating all that hydrogen that like feels like the muscle burn. So by delaying that acidosis, we're delaying fatigue. And I think it was 1976 when they actually were trying to get it banned from the Olympics. There's such a benefit for performance.
Wow.
Um,
Can't
of
you
course,
just
they
chew
weren't able to.
tablets? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I did, you can't get it anymore. I don't know why it's not available, but the Alka-Seltzer Gold,
Yeah.
I bought like boxes and boxes and boxes of that. And I literally just do, it's like the two fizzy biscuits. You throw them in the drink 30 minutes before workout. It works great. But yeah, you could dose wise. I'd probably stay between like zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Um, if you're doing anything like muscular endurance type of activities, and you'll really see some benefit there.
And what about for like hypertrophy? Is that helpful because you can just do more effective sets?
Yeah, exactly. That by delaying the accumulation of those hydrogen ions, you're going to be able to get more effective sets in.
Awesome. All right. What's number 10? What'd you save us
Num-
for last?
So number 10 is another like really accessible one. And beauty of this, like this is something you could put in your coffee instead of like stevia or sweetener or anything. You can even bake with it. It's called Trehalose, Trehalose, and it's a naturally occurring disaccharide. And it's made of these two glucose molecules that have like this really unique um, one-to-one glycosidic bond. And like if we're thinking about, well, where do we get this in food? It naturally occurs in mushrooms, algae, and insects. But probably not going to want to eat any of those, maybe the mushrooms, but pass on the algae and insects. Um, what's so cool about trehalose is it functions as this really slow burning carbohydrate. And in doing so, it helps stabilize cells. It has some antioxidant properties. It helps with autophagy. Um, it um helps to prevent breakdown of protein. And it also is a neutral osmolyte. So that's even something you could mix in with the eye cell water for more of that cell swelling effect if you want a little sweetness in there. And
Good for
for
gut
people
health,
that
right?
tremendous for gut health, yeah, it uh, feeds the good bacteria. And for people who um, are kind of have a sweet tooth, you can use it in any recipe you can find. Just substitute it for sugar, and it's going to work perfect. I got I'm an air fryer chef,
Nice.
and I found this recipe for it's really good. Like anytime I get kind of a sweet tooth, blueberry muffins in an air fryer, you use like plain Greek yogurt, trehalose, some lemon zest, blueberries, and um, I'll throw like a little bit of protein powder in there and just whip it up, put it in the muffin things, uh, air fry it for 350 for 12 minutes, and comes out great.
Man, that's
That
awesome.
sounds good.
I have I have the bulk supplements Trehalose, and it is good. It just tastes like a slightly less sweet sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like, I mean, I got to go back and like listen to this whole thing because there's just so much information here. What do you think? Okay, if somebody's like, hey, I want to dip my toes in some of these things, what's something that's super safe, biggest levers? If I was like, hey, I'll commit to doing 2 of these, see how it changes my performance. What would you say are like the absolute best for, let's just say, like, like an athlete trying to generally improve performance?
College wrestler, high school wrestler. We like wrestlers, so
I think the first thing the two things, easy choice, and you're going to see immediate benefit with them too. You won't even have to wait like more than a couple days. I would say the ketone ester and the eye cell water.
Okay.
Right away, you get somebody doing those two things consistently, and they'll notice immediate benefits for performance and endurance with the ketone ester. Over time, they'll notice better recovery, less inflammation, better brain function, and the eye cell water. everything they're already doing is going to work better than it ever did, and recovery is going to be good. They're going to preserve more muscle, especially like for the length of time that they're training. That hydration is so important. So yeah, those would be the two um, zero side effects, really accessible ones that I'd reach for. And even with all the others available, those would probably still be my first two choices.
It's awesome. So I'm going to run through them real quick. I've been taking some notes to make sure I can retain all this the whole time. So we have first is 1-MNA, and that's a small signaling molecule. Basically, that's going to help you more readily use NAD. I'm going to really
With
simplify here.
um,
Probably butcher a
it's
little.
no, that's pretty good. It's essentially just something that's going to improve NAD production and
NAD
utilization.
production. There we go. Then you have BAM15, which is really excellent for fat loss performance through creating a deficit in ATP and all the positive effects that come along with that. You have SLU or SLU-PP332. Was that right?
Yeah.
That amplifies the effects of exercise. It's basically an exercise mimetic, which increases the amount of ATP. And that also has a bunch of benefits.
And remember, just I want to make sure people are really clear on this. Do
Do
not
not
take
take them at
those
the
two
same
at the
time.
same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Do not take BAM15 and SLU at the same time. We got it. We have Synapsin RG3, or you can get buy the supplement online, Synapsin LTP. That's just great for neuro health. It's basically really bioavailable B vitamin, correct? B vitamins and ginseng. ATX 304, which helps kickstart the AMPK processes and just great for endurance and stamina. You have, sorry, why are you laughing, Ryan?
Stamina.
Stamina.
I know. It was
Great for
good.
stamina.
You're doing great. You're actually doing a great
you
job.
You can't talk.
I'm dead serious. You're doing great. Keep going.
We have Dr. Seed's Amino drink or iCell waters, like the brand name, if you want to buy it online. That's 5 grams creatine, 5 grams L-alanine, 4 grams glycine, 3 grams L-glutamine, 3 grams low-dose leucine, and you can mix your electrolytes in there. That's great for cellular hydration, which is just great for everything.
In 64
Everyone
ounces.
should be doing that one. I did this, I should get back on it more. I still do it every once in a while. I did this religiously during my PEC rehab. It definitely makes a difference. You feel really good. It doesn't taste bad at all. You have Arginine Alpha-Ketoglutarate or AKG. I don't know if I said that right. I think I did.
Yeah.
But that's basically, it helps with the signaling in the nitric pathways and is a more bioavailable version of L-arginine, helps remove metabolic waste. This is great for a lot of things. You said it basically helps you train harder for longer, and it can also be great for female hormones as well.
And it's intermediate for the Krebs cycle, so it really kind of keeps that engine humming.
Awesome. Ketone esters, particularly Ketone Aid, which none of us are paid by Ketone Aid. Anthony probably should be, but
please pay me. These things get expensive.
But they are expensive. That's the one downside to ketones for sure.
Yeah.
But they are basically great for helping your body utilize ketones as an energy source, which has a whole bunch of benefits, including smoothing out your blood sugar spikes, glucose regulation, same thing really, redoxing balance, reduces cravings and appetite, great for neuro health. The list goes on that one. And I think this is like, we're kind of just on this is starting to come into the mainstream. I'm seeing it more and more. I remember when you told me about it, Anthony, 6 months ago, it was like, I'd never heard of someone taking ketones unless they were in ketosis. I think it's becoming more and more mainstream, the benefits of this for everyone. And I think you'll see a lot of people. This is going to be like the next hot thing. I think it'll be more and more popular. Bicarbonate, which is an old school thing, 0.2 to 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight pre-workout, helps delay the accumulation of hydrogen, which basically gives you more endurance. And Trehalose, which is a naturally occurring disaccharide or sugar, really, from mushrooms and algae and insects, if you're into eating those things. But it's a super slow burning carb and helps really tremendously with your gut health, but also break down of protein and a whole bunch of other healthy processes.
Perfect. Yeah, you nailed
Nailed
it.
it.
That was
Sweet.
awesome. Let's go. That was brave, Max, trying to say
Thank
all
you.
those big
I was
words.
cheating. I was taking notes during on the side, but I know Anthony covered a ton, so I just wanted to sum it up a little bit there. But really appreciate you, Anthony. As always, a lot of awesome information. I think there's a lot of things, whether you're a little more cutting edge and brave, you can get into, or if you just want to go on, bulksupplements.com and some just off the shelf stuff that's no one should hesitate in taking. Kind of covered it all here.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. That was awesome. And maybe just real quick, shout out where people can find you, because I'm sure there's going to be some questions. Any questions I got, I'm sure we'd love to point them to you, because I don't think Max and I are going to be able to explain that like you.
Thanks again for having me on the show, guys. I absolutely love your show. I'm a fan and always enjoy our conversations. If you guys are interested in following me, it's just at ANTHONYCASTORE on Instagram.com. I'm also a fellow of the SSRP, and I'll be speaking at the Peptide World Congress this June in Las Vegas at the Wynn. It's going to be a really cool presentation. If you guys can make it, I'm going to be presenting a case study, and I'm going to use it to illustrate the whole thought process behind when I'm building a peptide protocol, how I customize it based on the training stimulus and the conditions around, and how we can really kind of leverage peptides and these other supplements for whatever our goals are. I'll also be speaking at the Athletes Builder conference in Indianapolis the weekend before. Um, and as my fiance will tell you, I absolutely love to talk about science. So anything I can do to help out, just feel free to reach out. Love to talk to people and answer questions and do whatever I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
See ya.
See you guys soon.